And welcome into Draft Nation. So much going on, whether it's the beginning of the NHL and NBA seasons a couple weeks in, maybe the soon-to-be end of the Major League Baseball season as the World Series has only got a couple games left in it, and that eventual offseason, or the NFL trade deadline. We have got you covered. Go to draftnation.com right now. Sign up, create your account, get a free membership, and you'll be covered on absolutely everything going on in all four major professional sports, especially, as I mentioned, with the trade deadline just days away, the NFL. And for Steelers fans, that means maybe a wide receiver. I know it means 6-2 at the bye, which I don't think should be that shocking, but I don't know. Maybe we're all wrong. Maybe we should be more surprised by this. Maybe there's more to expect out of this thing. From the Pat McAfee Show, Steelers reporter extraordinaire Mark Kaboly joins me now here on Draft Nation. Kaboom. I honestly don't think we're necessarily surprised, shocked anyway, that this team is 6-2. And thanks for taking the time. I know you didn't get a lot of beauty sleep because last night was the Monday night game. You were up late covering it. But, when we looked at the schedule, I think 6-2 was realistic. It's more about how they now pivot to the back half of the season. But I don't think there's nearly as much reason to be afraid about the back half of that schedule as there was when it first came out back in the spring, because this team, not only does the rest of the division look like it might be trending in the wrong direction, but the Steelers look like they're trending up, and away. I don't know. Maybe it's the teams they've played the last couple of weeks. Are you buying into everything we've seen over the last couple of weeks since Russ was inserted at quarterback, or should we take it with a big grain of salt considering the opponents?
Well, I guess you have to take it with a grain of salt right now. I mean, you're only halfway through the schedule right now, and like you said, you're playing the Giants and the Jets in back-to-back weeks, although what makes it more palatable is the fact that they scoring 30 points a game or close to 30 points a game. They're putting up 400 yards, and we haven't seen that here in 5-6 years. So that's why people are excited. Finally, it looks like you have a quarterback. Then you look at the back half of the schedule, like you said, and Cleveland's not as difficult as it is. But I usually don't get caught up with a lot of scheduling quirks here, other than the fact that, the Steelers do have all 6 of their division games. And I don't really care, Mac, how bad these teams might be. If the Bengals and Browns will be bad, a division game is a division game. It's going to be tight regardless moving forward. Right. So it's going to be harder on the back end of it. The reason why I tell you about I don't really buy the strength of schedule early in the season. I mean, not even early in the season. That week 2 win against Denver seemed like a throwaway. All of a sudden, Denver's 5-3 and right in the mix of things right now. So is that a good win? Where do we put this at and everything? So I think if they continue to play like this, I think they're, a 10-win team and the playoff team, but there's a lot of time between now and the end of the season.
So that's exactly what I was going to say is, like, this isn't college football, even in the 12-team playoff era where you got to worry about style points and whether this was a good win or that was a bad loss. Like, it's just about the standings, and they've won 6 games already. Yep. So even if they just go 500 in the division here, Mark, they're going to have 9 wins, right? And then it's just about winning one of those other 3 games on the schedule. Obviously, the first one out of the bye, you talk about games that look a whole lot different now than they did 2 months ago. They got to go to Washington, play Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. They got Philly later in the year, and they got the Chiefs on Christmas Day, which, even though the Chiefs are undefeated, I don't know, feels like a Chiefs team that could be had maybe just based on the way Mahomes is playing. All that is to say, I think you're spot on. I think it's a 10-win team that goes to the playoffs, but all of a sudden, if something breaks the right way in one of these games, especially in a Ravens game, maybe it's an 11-win team that's competing for a division title. You wrote it on Tuesday. Like, right now, they're in first place in the division, and if the playoffs started today, they'd be the 3 seed and hosting the Ravens.
Yeah, and there's not many teams in the NFL that have more wins than their 6 right now. It's only Detroit and Kansas City. Take it for what it's worth, which is probably really not much right now, but they are right in that thick of the things right now. But does it really matter, Chris? I mean, what have we talked about forever? I mean, they got to get to the playoffs and win, or regardless of what happens is going to be considered a wasted season. That's just how it is around here right now.
Well, here's why I think it matters, because I think it's interesting to ask the question of what the perception is down at 3400 South Water Street. Because Mike Tomlin, when he made the pivot from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson, talked about the offense being good but not great, right? And he felt like they could still grow some more, take some more steps. And I think we've seen that he was right in that expectation with Russell Wilson at quarterback. So if the belief is, hey, we know where a 6-win team right now should be around 10 wins and in the playoffs, maybe they don't feel the same urgency, whether it's Omar Khan, whether it's Mike Tomlin pushing Omar Khan to make a move before the deadline. I know you wrote about that on Tuesday as well, about the fact that everybody just assumes and has assumed for weeks, months even, that this team is going to make a move for a wide receiver at the deadline. But that market's going to get a little bit overheated, especially with Stephon Diggs out now. Maybe the Texans are in the market and not a lot left out there, right? Like we're talking about what? Mike Williams and I don't know, some other scrap. I mean, Darius Slayton maybe, but I don't know if the Giants are necessarily interested in dealing him anymore. I guess the question is, do you think they still feel the same sense of urgency now, 6-2 at the bye week, that maybe they felt back in August when they were actively trying to trade for Brandon Ayuk?
Yeah, I think so. I honestly think, but like you said, I think the market's pretty much dried up. You don't have many places to go to instantly improve the wide receiver position, and regardless of how well they've played over the past 2 weeks with Russell Wilson, and it's been considerably better with him at quarterback. I mean, let's not fool ourselves here. I mean, we can, as Mike Tomlin would say, I can convince myself about anything, but I can't convince myself that these wide receivers can continue to do this, and they're not going to be a weak spot at some point. If your goal is not only to win the division, but advance into the playoffs, I still look at the wide receiver position and say that's the place you need to upgrade. The question now is, like you said, who?
Right.
I mean, are you looking Mike Williams? I mean, like you said, I mean, you're looking at, I mean, even guys that you were looking at, the Christian Kirks of the world potentially, he's out. I mean, there's about a half dozen teams looking for wide receivers. It's going to be hard to find one right now, so you might be pretty much set with what you got right now. Is it good enough? Probably not. Maybe you can squeak by with it, but are they at the point they want to squeak by right now? No, you're 6 wins. You think you're a Super Bowl team. You don't want to squeak by. You want to do anything you can to improve this team moving forward. But I just think that the sand has run out of the old hourglass. There's nothing left out there, I don't think, that was going to improve them quickly.
Well, so what else can they do? Because here's the thing. Everything on offense seems to be going right for the most part, right? Like despite all the injuries on the offensive line and maybe some subpar play from young guys, Broderick Jones in spots, the offensive line seems to be handling things all right. Najee Harris, for the first time in his career, has 3 straight 100-yard rushing games. He and Jaylen Warren absolutely rolled it up on the Giants on Monday night. The tight ends maybe aren't catching a ton of volume as far as passes go, but when they're catching the ball, they're making the most of it. And the ball's getting spread around too, especially since Wilson took over.
Yeah.
So where is there room left for growth, I guess, in this offense?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think you can get more growth by just being more consistent early in games too. I mean, this team doesn't score very many points or put up very many yards early in games. So if you're looking for growth right off the bat, you have to improve that. But where does that come from? Specific positions. I mean, once again, it's hard to upgrade anything wide receiver wise, offensive line wise or anything like that. You have to look at the wide receiver position. But to be able to get around that, I think you hit on it, is if you spread the ball out and take your shots. Van Jefferson, his first 3 or 4 years in the league, was very good of down the field catching long passes. It wasn't like that last year. He was banged up a little bit, but all of a sudden you get a couple throws like you did on Monday night, then all of a sudden that opens things up. Same with a guy like George Pickens. So maybe this is where Mike Williams does fit in. Maybe you do go after him for probably minimal, right? You're looking at a couple $1 million in salary, and and maybe a 6th or 7th round pick for a guy who can stretch the field, play action down the field, everything that we thought that they wanted to do when they were constructing this team in March, we are seeing it right now. Don't turn the ball over from Russell, play action, run the ball, play defense, good special teams. That's what they're doing right now. So I think the plan has pretty much worked out. Now you just have to up that a little bit as the competition might be getting a little stiffer.
So you made a good point about the turnovers, and I think that's the next direction to go in here. And just the lack. I mean, only 2 teams, I think, maybe only 1 team, maybe it's just Buffalo, has thrown as few interceptions as the Steelers. The plus 10 in turnover margin. I think the only team ahead of them is Buffalo at 11. They're tied with Detroit at plus 10. So my concern here, and I think a lot of fans feel the same way, you could tell us if we're being over dramatic or not, is that they still show a propensity, this defense, that when they're not coming up with the big splash plays, as Mike Tomlin will put it, a TJ Watt strip sack, a Beanie Bishop interception, they are giving up long scoring drives, even to teams like the Jets and the Giants. They're getting gashed in the run game between the tackles here and there. We saw Tracy on Monday night have a big run in the second half that kept the Giants in the game, really, right? So is there a concern that if they're not turning over the opposition offense, when they do play better offenses, maybe like Washington coming out of the bye, maybe like Cincinnati, maybe like Baltimore, that if they don't win the turnover battle, they're going to be in trouble and they're not going to be able to score with those opposing offense?
Probably. I mean, all teams are like that, right? If you're not going to win the turnover battle, you're probably going to lose the game. So I would assume so. I mean, you can't, but on the flip side of that, they come up with plays when they need to be. You just can't dismiss that these big splash plays when they need them. If they yet to give up 20 points this season, you're going to win a lot of games if you're only giving up 20 or fewer points per game, regardless of how good your defense is and if you're spending $140 million on the group. I mean, it needs to play better than it did against the Giants. And I think where that starts off is to eliminate some of those bigger plays, which they were able to do early in the season. Not only was Tracy being able to break some off, but they were able to hit some deep throws down the field, 30, 40-yard throws. It's critical to be able to not allow those to happen. Those allow to happen, then you put yourself in a bad position. But I mean, we can go about this either way we want. We can even say, is this team even close to 6-2 if the special teams hasn't played like they have, right?
Yeah.
Is it considered? Are they going to continue to play this well? The special teams.
Who just emailed you, and what the hell are they bothering you for?
It says Reddit, and it said winner. I don't know what that means.
Chicken dinner.
I'm never on Reddit. I went on Reddit a couple times, and they just rip on me. So I just
wait. Is there like a subreddit that just has issues with Mark Kaboly?
There was one from a couple years ago when Chase Claypool got traded. I went on some Chicago place, a radio station, and ripped Chase Claypool, and they called me a big loser and whatever. And who got the last laugh on that one?
Where's Chase Claypool these days? Back in the
CFL? Is he in Vancouver still? I don't know where he's at.
I have no idea. But man, Chase Claypool. That's one.
Maybe I shut my mail off, right? Is that how that works?
Maybe. That actually takes me back. I'm not glad you brought up Chase Claypool. There's just not a lot of great memories there. But it takes me back to the 2020 season, right? And that was a team that a lot of Steelers fans, a lot of people around the league thought was a mirage, right? When they started 11-0, and it ended up being one, right? They totally collapsed down the stretch. Whether you want to talk about, having to play on a Tuesday afternoon against the Ravens or whatever else. There's a million different things that happened down the stretch that year. And then absolutely making a mess of themselves against the Browns at Heinz Field in front of nobody. But there are some people that say this team could be a mirage like that one. What gives you hope, I guess, that all of these things that are working well can continue to work well into the second half of the season?
Because I think they have options. I mean, they're not just going to beat you with the running game. They can throw the ball now with Russell Wilson. They could beat you with defense. They could beat you with special teams. That team in 2020 was flawed. I think not flawed, but maybe just limited in what they're able to do. This team, I think, as we've seen through 8 games, can beat you in a variety of ways. Plus, I think obviously the offensive coordinator is different. The offensive line coach is different, and this offensive line tends to get better over the past couple of years in the second half of the season. And if it even follows that path right now, look where this running game might be come week 10, 11, or 12. I just think they're just a better all-around team than they were 2020. I don't know if you can really make that comparison. I understand why people might say, hey, this team is a little iffy. I mean, you do got a 35-year-old quarterback, and you got injuries all over the offensive line, and you got one wide receiver who's sometimes moody. So, of course, things could go south in a hurry, especially with that back half of the schedule too as well. So I understand why people would say that, but I mean, it would have to be pretty much a colossal collapse here in the second half of the season, right?
Yeah.
Although, you mentioned that couple teams there. I mean, Kansas City, they struggle with constantly. I mean, I don't even know when the last time they beat them. Obviously, Washington is a team that's just on a rise, and they're really good. And every time they go to Philly, they get their butts whipped.
Yeah.
So then the rest of the games are division games.
Although no, I don't think they've been whipped by Philly in Philly since Shane Steichen left. Although I don't think they've been back since Shane Steichen left, maybe. But anyway, here nor there. Yeah, I mean, there's even if they only win the 3 out of their 6 division games, they're at 9 wins, and 9 wins
in though.
probably. I think 9 wins gets you in. I think
it's a tiebreaker. Yeah,
borderline. Let me ask you this. Because Najee the last 3 weeks has looked, I think, like the Najee we expected when he was drafted. Like, he's hitting holes decisively, and maybe it's because the offensive line is giving him better looks. I don't know. Maybe it's because he's not constantly being barraged by linemen 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. But he just looks more decisive, Mark, and he looks like that guy that we saw his final year at Alabama. Like, get to the line, put a foot in the ground, and go. And don't sit there and try to tap dance like you're Le'Veon Bell, because you're not Le'Veon Bell. So if he continues to produce, and it doesn't have to be a 100-yard game every week, but he just produces and is a part of the offense continuing to win games or be a part of winning games, is there the possibility that Omar Khan would go against the traditional Rooney thing of negotiating in season? Or are they going to let him hit the market?
They don't have. They made that decision back in, what was that, May? Once you don't pick up that 5th-year option, you're saying to him, go test free agency. I mean, it's all in his court right now. So no, they're not gonna. They will never, and that's one thing I could say, never change. Never change. I mean, that was an old Dan Rooney rule from the 90s that started free agency that absolutely ripped apart, I believe, that 93 team. And that was a rule right then. And they've held, you could say it's an antiquated rule, but hey, it applies to everybody now. If you give it to Najee Harris and all of a sudden next year, player X says, hey, you gave it to him, why not give it to him? So that's never going to change. And if Najee, they basically got a 2-month window maybe in the season to March to be able to freely negotiate with him. But if you're Najee, why would you sign? I think he's pretty much been gone after the season.
So even if he were to produce, and again, it doesn't have to be 100-yard games every single week, but if he's producing to the point where it's enough for the offense to continue to, like I said, be a part of them winning games, 400-yard games on offense, 25, 28, 30 points a week, they would. So when will they start to consider, I guess, talking to any of the pieces that are involved this year that could be gone in the offseason? I'm looking at the quarterback too, talking to these guys about, hey, we'd like you to be back. I mean, are they legitimately going to wait until they're done in January, February?
Yeah. They won't mention it to anybody right now. They're singularly focused. Where have you heard that before?
Yeah.
They're just focused on winning games right now. That we'll worry about next year when next year gets here. That's their train of thought now. And I mean, like it or hate it, I mean, that's the way they go about business now. I don't really care what happens next year. I mean, just saying with, like, say, the quarterback room, we've all question what are they going to do with quarterback next year. You know what their thought is? I don't really care. We'll deal with that next year.
So here's the thing, and you make a good point. Like it's the old Dan Rooney thing about not negotiating in season, and that's just the way it's always been, right? But Mike Tomlin's also made a point when talking about players in the past that, well, not everybody plays by the same rules because some guys are more important, right? Like it's not necessarily fair as we look at it. So yeah, you know what? It may not be fair, but if Russell Wilson comes in and they're scoring 28 points a game with Russell Wilson at quarterback and Najee Harris is running for 85, 90 yards a week, maybe 100, then I do think you have to consider coming off of that a little bit, right? Or, I don't know. It seems silly to me to say, oh, we're so singularly focused on this year that we can't even think about next year at all. Like, that's where Omar has been really good, in my opinion, is being willing to change the way they do business, not drastically, but just enough that it's forward looking enough that they don't say, well, it's 24. We can't worry about anything else till we get to February because that's the way we do things because we're Stillers.
But if it was up to Omar, he probably would have that train of thought, right? This is one thing that it's above his head. What do they say? Above my pay grade a little bit right here.
Uh-huh.
It's above his pay grade right there. And they're not going to do it. Do you honestly though? Do you really want to pay a guy $7 million to be the running back? I think what separated Najee Harris this year from his previous years have been those long runs. He's been able to turn those 10s into 30s and 40s. And I'm pretty sure if you get those guys together, the coaching staff, they're saying that's a lot to do with scheme of Arthur Smith allowing those runs to turn from 15 to 30. I don't see that much of a difference in the guy in himself from the previous 2 years to this year, other than the numbers. And what's the one thing that's changed? The scheme, the offensive coordinator. So you put Jaylen Warren in there, you save $5 million, he does the same stuff. That's what they're probably thinking.
Okay, so let's remove running back from the conversation then, because I think you make a good point. Running backs are quote unquote a dime a dozen these days. And if it's the same system and the same scheme and pretty much the same offensive line, you're going to expect Jaylen Warren to do a lot of the same things. But when it comes to quarterback, again, I know they're going to tell us they're singularly focused on this week and this year and all that. But like they brought in Justin Fields for a reason. And it wasn't necessarily at first about this year. So if Russ continues to produce, would they consider bringing him back? And again, would they consider approaching that before the end of the regular season?
Yeah, well, no, it was not going to happen before the end of the season. That's for sure. But if you look at Russ, first of all, it's 2 games. Let's see what he does over the next 6 or 7 games here to be able to make that decision. If he's able to, I think they're in a no-lose situation, to be honest with you. If he performs well, he's going to want to come back. How much money does he need? Does he need another $40 million to go see David Tepper in Carolina? They're not close, right? I can see Justin Fields moving on from that, but you may, as well as Russell has been playing, it might now change Justin Fields' mind. It's his choice, right? Why would he want to stay here and sit on the bench for another year or 2 when he could go to aforementioned Carolina Panthers with money bags?
No one wants to go to Carolina, Mark.
Well,
nobody wants to go to Carolina.
You know what? I wouldn't want to go to Carolina unless you give me $40 million. And
okay.
David Tepper got a couple bucks in that bank right there. So what I'm saying is you might lose Justin Fields, but you got to wait till the season. Russell could blow out his knee tomorrow, and all of a sudden you're relying on a guy like Justin Fields. So that's their train of thought. That's why they don't want to do anything right now. Let's wait till May. We'll wait till March. And where's Russell Wilson going to go? That's probably what their train of thought is right now. If they win 10, 11 games, win a playoff game, Russell Wilson's probably thinking, hey, this is my best chance to win another title. And if I win another Super Bowl, I'm a guarantee Hall of Famer. So that's probably his mindset.
All right, before I let you run, what do we need to keep an eye out for during the bye week, other than the trade deadline, or is that it? Do we just sit around and wait for next Tuesday to see if something happens?
Yeah, this would probably be the weekend. Now, you know what? Probably not. I mean, you'd probably be more of a Monday type of situation where they would make some moves. I wouldn't be surprised if they not move somebody, but acquire somebody on the defensive side of the ball. Try to solidify that places where you need some depth at. I mean, you're getting Cam Sutton back, so that should help you in the slot corner.
Is he going to push Beanie out of a job? Because Beanie,
should. Be honest with you, Beanie's had the interceptions and he deserves to play. But what I saw from Cam Sutton in that brief amount of time where he was practicing in the spring, Beanie was not even close to what he's able to produce. So is that going to take a week or two to get him in there and ready? But that provides depth. I think they need some more depth on the defensive line. I think you might see a depth piece added. And I'm sure they're going to scour the market for the wide receiver and see if anything they can scrape up. I mean, I don't think Scotty Miller and Andy Isabella on your bench is going to really cut it if Van Jefferson or Calvin Austin get hurt. So you have to look at that as well. And right now, if I was making one move and say, put money on who they would acquire, I would say Mike Williams would be that guy that would be at the top of the list right now.
Offensive line going to be all good by the time they get back from the bye. Zach Frazier on the way.
I think he'll be back for the game. Fatanu's obviously out.
Yeah. Is Broderick Jones going to look any better than Rocky chasing down a chicken in a vacant lot?
Yeah, he cost him that touchdown on Monday, with a face mask. That was kind of interesting. I don't know what's gotten into him. I mean, that's just maybe he's the one that needs the bye week and needs some. If anybody can get the best out of him, I would say it's Pat Meyer. Maybe he's had too much success early. I don't know. I don't know how to explain a guy with that much talent, that much athleticism, struggling that much. So,
he basically lost his job to Dan Moore. So, and no, Dan Moore's actually been really good through the first half of the season.
Go figure.
But he basically lost his job to Dan Moore. So I don't know. Maybe he's.
There's somebody over the past couple of years that said Dan Moore wasn't that bad. Oh, that was me. Oh, there was somebody over the past couple of months said that Russell Wilson was by far a better quarterback. Oh, who was that? There was somebody last year that said Mason Rudolph was.
Oh, hey, no, I was on the Rudolph train too. Although he threw more picks in 5 minutes the other day than the Steelers have all
that
season.
Team is god awful.
Yeah.
I mean, did he have, how much effect did he have on giving up 52 points?
Nothing. He actually had him in the game in the first quarter. But the flowers are on the way. Okay, you and Mike Tomlin. We're out there leading the Russ bus, and you can be happy now.
He asked me the other day if he should go with Russell, and I said go with it.
Yeah.
Another thing is, man, I'm 8-0 picking Steeler games, so it's all going to come crumbling down here soon. And
against the spread or straight up?
I think I've won against the spread, but I just picked it straight up. I'm pretty locked in. Hey, the money line works too, there, Mac. It works.
It works. All right, Kaboom. We're going to let you run. Thanks for doing this. We'll catch up again soon. Catch him on the Pat McAfee Show. And, of course, on X, all of his stuff is there. Nice, big, long columns and articles, keeping you up to date on everything happening with the Steelers. And maybe even a little taste of that crown jewel, too, because he's contributing to WWE as well. That's our guy, Mark Kaboly, right here on Draft Nation. Thanks for going on the clock, Kaboom. We'll catch up again soon.
All right. We will see ya.
See ya.